गुड मॉर्निंग एंड वेलकम टू गना शॉर्ट। गना शॉर्ट में आप सबका स्वागत है। We're going to talk of Xiconomics and China's year of the snail. This is the year of the snail. Well, you think this is the year of the snail? Next year will be even worse. So you'll have to find a slower snail than what it has happened today. That's what I'm going to talk of. I'm going to talk of why. Just look at it. Just look at Xi Jinping's face and see where that snail is happily going along, right? And that's what China is all about today. You have to understand this. You have to understand this phenomenon. Like I said yesterday evening, I was not sure. In fact, I wanted to talk today morning about the Thailand Cambodia spat. Is if nothing, there's a war going on. We need to understand where it is going, and it's going to have effects. But I'll do that tomorrow, day after. Yesterday evening, I read a couple of uh, posts in the social media. Made a lot of sense. And that's why I thought I must analyze it and put it across to you. And it gives you an insight into what's happening in China. And that's important for us to understand. It's just not everyone knows China has slowed down. But how is it slowed down? Will it recover? My view is that it will not recover. The the recovery point of China is gone. In fact, if you look at it in the continuum of history, this period of 20 years between 2000 to now till 22, 23, or maybe let's say 30 years, going back to mid 90s to the mid 2025 20s, is an anomaly of its own kind, unnatural to China. That's gone. So what's going to happen further is a vastly different China going ahead. People might say, oh, it has developed, progressed, X, Y, Z. I don't think so. I don't think so. And I think personally, China is going to reverse from here on. It's going to regress. And this is what I've said. I've already said it's in recession. I spoke of the slow collapse of China 2 years back. Well, it's playing out. It's slow. That's why it's a snail. That's why it's a snail. Does it have effect on us? Of course, it has an effect on us. It is sitting on oxygen or a land. We have to kick them out eventually, even if it takes a century. You have to. There's no doubt about that. You have to kick them out of all those pockets they have occupied. Is the time coming? Well, if you don't understand it, you'll miss that window of opportunity when it opens up. And is that window of opportunity opening up? I think so. How we play it is a different story. But we need to understand what's happening. It's at that tipping point when we have to act. And that is why I'm at it regularly with China. So let's get going. I might sound a little disjointed over this podcast because I'm taking different strains from different angles and trying to build a story around that. That's why, well, I would say please do like this video and also subscribe to Ghana Shot. Okay, look at this. Look at this, thing by Economist. The Economist puts out a tweet. Look at this picture. It says China's monster surplus is not as scary as it looks. Why? The monster surplus, you don't have to take it. It might have a surplus all around the world. Those countries which are, bound by China and are indebted to China and who are, joined at the hip with China, for them, this surplus is scary. Not for us. We're not that dependent on China. We are dependent on some extent, but not that much. And how many things can China weaponize? So is it time for us to weaponize that dependency? That's the point I'm going to talk of, or we have to understand. And why is this thing can you can weaponize this dependency? India can weaponize whatever dependency it has on China because the Chinese economy is not internally based, it is externally based. China is dependent on others today for its economic growth or revival. If I am dependent on my neighbor for my happiness, the neighbor can make me very unhappy. You have to understand that. If you understand this fundamental thing, rest everything falls into place. So that's how it is. Yeah, I see a comment. I would say, please continue with the travelogue series, sir. I will. I have the one on Arunachal Pradesh and Tawang and all ready. So I'll probably do it tomorrow evening. Yeah, today is Friday. Tomorrow evening I'll do it. That's a promise. It's ready. Okay. So right, let's go ahead. I found this tweet by Michael Pettis, who himself has commented on another tweet by someone called Lizzie. He says, interesting post by Lizzie on recent Kishi article by Xi Jinping on the need to boost consumption. So when I saw this first line, my ears stood up. Why? Kishi is a virtually a inner circulatory magazine or a bi-monthly. It comes once in 2 months. It's a journal. It's a Communist Party journal, and they put out articles from that once in 2 months, and they are solely dedicated to Xi Jinping. It's as if God's gospel. An article comes in that you have to read it carefully. And off late, they've started putting it in open public. Earlier, it used to be only in Mandarin Chinese, and one couldn't get hold of it. Now you can, but articles in that come, which is in open circulation, is something different. What is in Mandarin is something different. Like China, what is outside is different. What is inside is different. So he says of in Quishi, Xi Jinping has spoken about how to boost consumption and the need to boost consumption. In fact, need and the how. So I went into details. I went into the details of this post, and that's what uh, Lizzie talks of. What is here in Mandarin is Xi Jinping's what Xi Jinping says. Now, Lizzie says even stronger political signaling from Xi Jinping on the urgency of fixing China's consumption. So very strong. Plus consumption plus domestic demand shortfall problem. Xi Jinping is seized with it. In a new Qishi article published today, that was yesterday's this thing, it's right, titled Expanding Domestic Demand is a Strategic Choice. This is funny. Expanding domestic demand is a strategic choice. I think expanding domestic demand is a strategic compulsion in China. Yet they have framed it as a strategic choice. It's their choice. Choice is different from compulsion. Okay. Z elevates weak domestic demand to a core issue of economic stability and security. Right? Making clear that the pivot towards domestic demand is no longer optional. Very important. Okay. The piece is very direct in identifying insufficient domestic demand as the most pressing problem facing the economy and calls for moving faster to close the consumption gap so that domestic demand can become the main engine and anchor of growth. So far, so good. This is their thinking now, thus, after so many years. Okay. Then Z argues that the real advantage of a big economy like China lies in its ability in domestic circulation, stressing the stronger domestic demand does not contradict opening up, but instead strengthens China's global position and global competition. All this is fine. It's logic. If I can do domestic demand and still export, I am on top. And this is what dual circulation was all about 3 years back. But it failed. The dual circulation failed. At that point of time, when exports were being curbed, he said, I'm going to do dual circulation during the COVID time, and it failed. So I'll talk of why it failed also. Okay. It failed because people refused to consume. And mind you, people refused to consume at a time when China was at its peak, 2019-20. And today, it's the other way around, right? And he's talking of not dual circulation the way he spoke then, but he's talking of pivoting towards domestic demand. And then he says the article puts particular weight on consumption, emphasizing that boosting demand ultimately depends on employment, social security, redistribution, especially expanding the middle income group so households can spend and feel secure enough to do so. Fantastic. The logic, isn't it? Okay, now let's see what further. Z calls for more disciplined investment, prioritizing new infrastructure, high tech manufacturing, strategic emerging industries, reviving private investment, etc. Here it comes. He says more investment, new infrastructure, high tech manufacturing, strategic emerging industries, and reviving private. They are all contradictory to each other. Okay. It argues that higher quality, more self reliant supply must not only meet existing demand but also create new demand, etc. So, as per Lizzie, it says so the near term policy levers are likely to be on the supply side, not on the demand side. They identify the problem as demand and they're strengthening the supply side. That's the contradiction. Now, I put what Xi Jinping has written actually. The most fundamental way to expand consumption is to promote employment, improve social security, optimize the income distribution structure, expand the middle income group, and solidly promote common prosperity. So, same Xi Jinping language. We must establish and improve a long term mechanism for expanding residents' consumption so that residents have stable incomes to consume, no worries to dare to consume, and an optimal consumption environment with strong sense of gain to willingly consume. This is what he says. This is right. Okay. What is the solution? He says we must improve the mechanism for expanding investment, expand space for expanding effective investment, appropriately advance the deployment of new infrastructure construction, expand investment in high tech industries and strategic emerging industries, and continuously stimulate the vitality of private investment. So you're looking at investment. Investment is what killed them. China has over-invested in its infrastructure, whether it is roads, bridges, dams, or high-speed rails. They have more than anything. Everything is loss-making. There's no return, and he wants to do exactly that with high-tech stuff. Let me explain the fundamental thing. Okay, let me see. I'll go back to what Michael Pittis had to say about this. And then I'll explain to you the problem of this consumption. People don't understand it. Right. For all the talk, however, it isn't clear that Beijing recognizes or is willing to discuss how the income redistribution needed to boost consumption is likely to affect either manufacturing competitors or political institutions. See, if you want to boost consumption or revive consumption, people need to have money to spend. That's the fundamental. If you, it's as if you can transfer to without transferring from. Even if households are to retain a higher share of GDP, right? Businesses or government must retain a lower share. That's the important part. And I'll explain this again. This is important. When other low consumption, high manufacturing economies have rebalanced towards more consumption, the manufacturing share has always declined, while overall growth has slowed or even contracted. This isn't just an unlucky coincidence. If Beijing continues to insist on avoiding the latter, it will be unable to accomplish the former. This is the crux of what the whole story is. And China is doing exactly opposite of what it should do. I mean, I'm not saying they're doing wrong. Yeah, they're prisoners of their own story. And why Michael Pettis? Because I think his understanding of China is fantastic. Okay, look at it this way. I need money to spend. If I don't have money to spend, I'll not spend. As simple as that. So where do I get money from? I get money from my job. So my job has to pay me enough money, right? The money I get, I have to save. I have to also spend. So my saving was hitherto for in flash. That's gone. So I need an alternate mechanism to save. Is that there in China? It's not there. Today, the alternate mechanism to save is in bonds. What are the bonds doing? Bonds and banks. Bonds and banks. Banks also lend to the government, and bonds also are government bonds, local government, whatever it is. Or those bonds subsidize who? Manufacturing. What does the manufacturer do? He lives on the subsidy and sells items at below price. So it becomes cheap. When it becomes cheap, there's no profit. You go out, you can sell as much as you want, you're not getting profit. Why? Because you want to export your way out. So, what is the alternative to this story? You have to withdraw those subsidies. If you withdraw the subsidies, then the manufacturing will become competitive. The involution which we talk of today is between people who are fighting with each other to reduce prices and capture the market. If the subsidy is taken out, then people will capture the market through quality, through better pricing. The pricing competition will be there still, but it will be through quality. And if they can't, they'll collapse and go. There'll be a collapse. There will be a collapse if you want to incentivize consumption. But those who survive that will create jobs, will create a higher economy. Now, how do you incentivize that? Instead of giving subsidy to people, is subsidy to government, give subsidy to people, direct subsidy to people, put money in the hands of the people. Then people will buy what they want. People have to be this thing of tomorrow I'll be safe. That Xi Jinping has to bear a political cost, and they have to break that subsidy circle of death. And people should say, okay, if I put money in the bank, I can be able to take it out when I want. The property market will not revive because already China has more property than it needs. The next generation also. And the social condition of China is that people are contracting. So whatever property they have is something which they don't need. So that market is not going to revive. Infrastructure, they've gone so far ahead, they can't revive. I mean, they don't need it. Building more infrastructure like dams, and all has got no value. So the Chinese are in a trap. The only way to get out of that trap is to reduce manufacturing. If they reduce manufacturing, their GDP craters. And that is why you see this fellow, Xi Jinping, he talks demand, consumption, everything, but he's doing investment and manufacturing. If you're doing the same thing again and again, you're reinforcing failure. And China is in the path of doing reinforcing failure. Both that Lizzie and Michael Pettis have actually said so, right? So he says this isn't a unlucky coincidence. If Beijing continues to insist on avoiding the latter, it will continue to be unable to accomplish the former. Former is consumption. You have to reduce manufacturing. You have to make manufacturing more competitive. It is not competitive on subsidies. It is competitive without subsidies, on qualitative competition. Then the prices in China will go up. If the prices go up, then the profit margins of companies will go up. If the profit margin of companies go up, they have an incentive to expand. If they have an incentive to expand, they'll create jobs. If right, and once jobs are created, people will, incomes will rise. And if incomes rise, then people will be uh, incentivized to spend, right? I mean, you have to do those things. If you want to go back to investment, and you have to diversify your focus. Doing the same thing over and over again is no this thing, and that's what's happening in China, and that's why China won't recover. Okay, this is a very interesting graph I found with some tweet. Just look at this thing. The two graph. What is this graph? This is the consumption graph. And this graph is the production graph. And this difference between these two is what they're trying to export. And that is their problem. Unless you equalize them, do something about it, nothing will happen. And if you look at this consumption, it is flattening out. Look, this is all in Chinese. So this came in the social media. So I caught hold of that and I translated it. What's in Chinese? The commentary on this graph. So let me read it out and explain to you what this says. Okay, post pandemic, all that problems started coming out with the pandemic. Everyone knew China is going to slow down, but the pandemic accelerated all their problems. Post pandemic, supply demand divergence has intensified, with both consumption and production forming new trends. Production took off, consumption went down. Right? Uh, but starting from the second half of this year, consumption has begun to weaken further. See this. From in this year, consumption has begun to weaken further. Earlier, it was going low and production was going high. But they now say, look, it has gone even worse. Okay. Even failing to sustain post pandemic trends. If the post pandemic trends were bad, now it is even worse, which has further exacerbated the supply demand divergence. It's very clear. The Central Economic Work Conference has also taken note of this issue, stating in its assessment of current economic problems, the domestic contraction of strong supply and weak demand is prominent. They know the problem and they've been trying to solve it for the past 10 years or even more. Okay, they're not fools, but they're prisoners of their politics. They are prisoners of the Communist Party politics. Yeah, has also taken, stating in its assessment of current economic problems, the domestic contradiction of strong supply and weak demand is prominent. This places greater emphasis on the supply demand contradiction compared to before, rather than solely highlighting insufficient demand. They know that the supply is more than the demand. How to elevate the supply demand contradiction? Answer: more vigorous stimulus for consumption, that is stimulating demand, plus more vigorous measures against involution. If you want more vigorous measures against involution, you have to cut down subsidies, okay, and overcapacity. That is suppressing supply. That's what they themselves are talking of. However, However, the Central Economic Work Conference policies on these two fronts appear relatively conservative. The tone for consumption policy seems more conservative than last year. Okay? While it doesn't anticipate a rollback, even if there's an increase in effort, it will be very limited and hardly qualifies for more vigorous. So they recognize the problem, but somehow they're not able, they won't do it because there are political implications. Okay? In contrast, the tone for investment policies is more urgent, calling for halting the decline and achieving stability and specifying particular directions. But this will inevitably constrain the space for measures against involution and overcapacity governance. I mean, it's very funny. That's the thing. In my earlier preview of economic conference, I pointed out that measures against involution and overcapacity governments have cooled. Their measures against involution have cooled actually, where they should be increasing. As expected, and next year they're likely to maintain this moderate intensity with perhaps a slight uptick, but nothing approaching more vigorous. Therefore, with consumption stimulus policy leaning conservative on one hand, and measures against involution and overcapacity governance leaning conservative on the other, the supply demand contradiction is unlikely to see a significant improvement in the next year. So this graph will continue. Whereas this graph has to converge and go along the median. Okay, this will expand. This from a different source altogether. That was a different source. This is a different source. Both are talking the same language. And why? Because Kyushi talks the same language. Xi Jinping is talking the same language. So those of us who think that China is going to recover, it's a matter of time, and all that, don't fall for the official commentary. Also, there is a set of people who in India and internationally want all of us to believe that China is recovering because their skin is in the game. They have made huge investments there. If those investments fail, they fail. Those countries fail. So their narratives are coming out that China will recover. And all of them, today the global narrative is external to China. What is happening externally? What is happening internally? People just say, oh, it's happening, but it'll get. But their fundamental problems are not going to change. And we'll talk of that also. Okay? Look at this. This is from FT, and the source is National Bureau of Statistics of China. Okay? And if you see this, have a look. Retail sales have gone down. They're just going down over the year. This is from February 2024, last year. So now they've gone down. They've gone up in between, and then they're going down. And now November is very bad. Look at fixed asset investment. It's cratering, and I spoke of it yesterday. Okay? Industrial production is going down. That's the worrying part. Even the industrial production is going down. And property investment, it has taken a new story. There's a different cratering happening in the property investment. And this is not recovery. It is complete collapse. If property was a problem earlier, property was a problem when this Evergrande kind of collapse happened. Then they did some stabilization. Now the effect of the population is catching on. See, as population reduces, as your ability to this thing goes, that's why you're talking of 2.4 million foreclosures of home loans. You know what will people do with 2.4 million flats which you have foreclosed on? The Vanke collapse is very significant because Vanke was government supported and they were not over leveraged. But yet, today they are on the verge of a default. If that goes, you are in a tailspin and you'll see a new problem coming in China. They can't export their way out. Okay. Now Michael Pettis, someone else commented that they're going to recover property. Yeah, what Michael Pettis says, he talks sense. Okay. And he's very scathing in this reply. You have to understand, I'll read it out. Okay. I don't think our disagreement is so much on Minsky as it is on the economic facts on the ground in China. So he's talking of economic facts on ground. The property market in China isn't stabilizing, as you claim, but rather weakening at an accelerating pace. Inflation under 1% isn't a sign of stability. Inflation under 1% is a sign of deflation, and this is happening after faking and everything. They still their inflation is under 1%. Actually, it is deflating, and it is deflating now for the past 2 years. It is actually under 0%. That's what he himself talked. And it is seen in China as a concrete expression of weak domestic demand internally and something that needs urgently to be reversed. It's rather silly to think that lower inflation in the US and Europe is a good thing. If lower inflation in US and Europe is a good thing, it must automatically be a good thing even in economies suffering deflation and weak demand. So I yesterday and day before, I've been saying this is an economy in recession. I'm calling it out again. It's in recession. It's not just weak demand or deflation anymore. And the GDP is fake. Okay? Is a suffering. Your claim that domestic demand is steadily rising, boosted by expanding public sector work, is total nonsense. Consumption growth continues to decline, and investment growth has declined so rapidly that it has been actually negative in the last 3 months and negative for the year overall. Beijing's work conference last week made clear the decline in demand has made reviving investment a greater priority than ever. Even though Chinese economists admit there is no obvious place in which to invest further. That's the problem with China. They don't know where to invest. There's no place to invest. Okay, invest is infrastructure. They don't need any more infrastructure. I don't play down the world-class infrastructure as you foolishly claim. On the contrary, I point out that China has by far the best infrastructure in the world, is far more likely to be evidence of overspending on infrastructure as evidence of underspending. If you are going to argue about the Chinese, you really have to get some understanding of the debate within China and at least some of the data correct. Why? That guy who, you go into him, he's a guy who's propagating China because of vested interests. There's a narrative which is going on. A global narrative is being propagated by those people who are going to lose with the way China is going and with Chinese itself. Because the fundamentals of the society are changing. This is what we have to understand. If the fundamentals of a society changes, their economy also will change. Their politics will change. The next step, I'm looking at when will their politics change? Will the Communist Party of China democratize? Or will it be toppled? Will there be a revolution? I don't know. It's too early to say. But please remember, every century, China has gone through a cataclysmic struggle. In the last century, they had three struggles. One was the Bayan period, or the period of the warlords in the first quarter of the 20th century. The second quarter and the third quarter of the 20th century was under Mao, the civil war. They had a civil war lasting 10 years. And then Mao's own great leap forward in the cultural revolution he put on. Three distinct phases. And then Deng Xiaoping came with his opening up and market reform. If you take that also, there's four phases in China in one century. In this century, I think we are witnessing the first end of the first phase of growth. And what's going to come is problematic. So I'm now connecting societal issues with history and economy. Things are not rosy. Today morning on my walk, I came across this fantastic talk by Michael Beckley, okay, on China in YouTube. And I picked up a few slides. And he says China's rise is reversing. On that, there's no doubt. In fact, he makes 3 points. So the 3 points he makes are China's rise is reversing. There's a China hangover with all of us. We're going to suffer this hangover. After all, we've been drunk on the China rise theory for the past 20 years. So there's a China hangover which is happening. Everyone thinks China is doing well, or must do well, or will continue to rise. And it's got a $19 trillion economy. That's a dead economy. Okay. And the third point he makes is there is conflict with China is on the cards. That is something which is interesting. That conflict with China is on the cards. Interesting for us. Of course, if you listen to that YouTube, exposition, he talks of conflict. He's an American, so he talks of conflict with China in American thinking. But I look at it differently. And this is something which we need to understand. Conflict of China is coming. I've always maintained that. And he says, in one of the slides, he shows this slide of rising debt as a percentage of the GDP. From somewhere where we were together, India and China, China has taken over debt. China is the most indebted nation. This is where we are. We went, we had our own rise in debt, but we are not stabilized. Says from being a normal nation with normal levels of debt like India, we are there. It's gone up. So if you want accelerated growth, you have to go be contented with accelerated debt. And as this debt trap keeps going up, your ability for the supply demand means end goes off. That is why China is caught in its own trap now. And then 3 years back, 2021, around COVID, everyone said China is going to overtake the GDP of USA. It was Japan who called it out first in an article. I still remember doing a podcast on that. Today, it is different. This is China's GDP relative to the US in percentage. It's going down. And this gap is widening between USA and China. Look, I'm not talking of USA. You can have an argument about USA separately. That US economy is going to collapse and debt, yeah, all that is a different story. But I'm not my analysis of China. And I'm very sure if you put India's graph on this, okay, it might be somewhere here. It might be, you know, but you'll see slowly and steadily the gap will close. And you'll see that the fundamental strength of the Indian economy and in the Indian system is far better than the Chinese. And that is where the conflict starts. That's why I showed this. And today, China is hugely energy dependent. Hugely energy dependent. Where does it get its maximum energy from? It gets from Russia, Iran, and Venezuela. Three sources, apart from others. And much of it comes through dark shipping. This is something which I got today. I, just about 10 minutes before I was getting on, I saw this thing, this graphic, and I said I must show it to all of you. Venezuelan oil. Look at this. See how much China consumes Venezuelan oil. So 90% of Venezuelan export goes to China. What's happening in Venezuela? Why did I do that program on Venezuela? And people again, connect what I'm talking now to what this is. And today in Venezuela, they have already started reducing the amount of oil they pump out because they don't have capacity to store what they pump out. And there's no export of oil from Venezuela going out. What is going out is official export. Sanctioned oil is not going out. And Venezuela has been sanctioned by USA. You might like the whole story or not. You might like what USA is doing or not. But I'm looking at the effect, cause and effect. So if Venezuelan oil is not going to come to China, what will be the effect on Chinese economy? What is the effect on Chinese economy? For all the screaming which we do, it's going to get hit. And don't be surprised if tomorrow something happens in North Arabian Sea and the Iranian oil is also turned off. You see the fun in China. So then what will happen is, I'll go back. The snail will go even slower. The year of the snail will extend to 25, 26, 27, 28. It will become the decade of the snail. That's what I wanted to put across to all of you today. See, okay. Now let's look at a few factors why China will never recover. One, of course, is economics. On that, we should not have any doubts left. Okay? Don't have doubts on that. But let me put a few factors due to which China will not recover at all. The first is their demography. Their demography, before, say, in the first quarter of this century, they had a positive demography. You can talk of other things, but the fact is they had a huge working population. And this working population didn't have aged people to support. And with the introduction of the one child policy, they didn't have any children to support also. As so, this population was free to work and produce. That population has aged today, and there is no one to replace their one single child. So, the working population of tomorrow is a burdened population. If I put it in numbers, earlier they had 15 workers who had to support one aged guy. Going forward, and this is not happening. That's why I keep saying 2030. You'll see the effect of all this by 2030. I'm putting a timeline on it. Maybe 1 year here and there, but that's it. They're going to have two guys working for one man. Where is 15 people working for one person and where is two people working for one man or woman, one person? The demographic thing has flipped completely. They had 15 people working, 15 people consuming. Today they have only two people working in comparison. Okay? As a result, as their population declines, their consumption will go down. The consumption of any people who are burdened with a responsibility will go down. I'm burdened by the fact that, look, in old age, I have to look after my mother, my children, everyone. So I can't consume. I can't go and buy a second car or a third flat. And as this median age goes further, responsibilities increase. The unburdened society, China was an unburdened society till about 2020. It not so, it actually started before, but I'll put it till 2020. Hereafter, it is a burdened society. This burdened society cannot consume. So whatever Xi Jinping does or doesn't do, the consumption will go down. If the consumption goes down, I'm not saying go up, it go down. And it is happening on ground. I'm not explaining something which I have not forecasted earlier. How will China's economy revive? The year of the snail will remain. Next year will be the year of the snail. Okay. Look at the markets. Till now, there have been an exporting economy. 2000, 2010, 15, 20, 20, people were accepting their exports. Even India. Why go that far? Mr. Modi, as the chief minister of Gujarat, you see how much investment he brought from China as a chief minister in his tenure. How much he opened up the Gujarat market for China. He opened up. It's a fact. It's not only he. Why blame him? So did Tamil Nadu. So did every Tom, Dick, and Harry in India. It was not only India, USA, South Africa, all these fellows. Today, the same markets are putting barriers to China. We all discussing. Why am I discussing this? So, what they had open markets are now a market with barriers. So that exports have slowly started hitting a ceiling. People talk of that 1.5 trillion plus trade surplus. But the fact is, they're manufacturing less, yet their trade surplus has gone up. Why? Their imports have reduced. And this will increase. If the energy doesn't go into China in the next 1 year, their trade surplus will increase. But if you look at the real figures and not look at the trade surplus, because trade surplus is a narrative. Oh, China's trade surplus. But if you look at the actual things, there's a problem in this trade surplus. The third factor is the fact that China was an aided economy. People went to China to invest. People went to China for their markets. People went to China for many things. That has gone. Chinese are now going outside and establishing markets or factories to sell items back into China. This is coming from Chinese sources. Yesterday also I spoke of it. And I spoke of it day before yesterday when I spoke of China and recession. This is the third factor. So I've spoken of demography, I've spoken of markets, I've spoken of the fact that no more an aided economy. No one is giving it, it's in a technology denial system. It's a different thing. Xi Jinping might say, I have my own technology and all. He doesn't have that technology. They have some technologies. No one wants that technology. That technology of China is not giving them dividends. No one wants to adopt, Weibo and any case they have this wall which doesn't allow it to go out. That firewall. So their software, their everything doesn't go out. It's only internal. There's a limit. Unless you're like Microsoft, Google, and Apple and Amazon, which you can sell worldwide, the market is gone. You a huge market like India is firewalled out. You won't accept any Chinese apps. I'm sure the government of India is not foolish to accept Chinese apps. So what, for that matter, USA. So what's happening? It's no more an aided economy. It's an opposed economy. Will it grow? It will not grow. Earlier, people wanted China to grow. Now, people don't want China to grow. Because whatever, if China grows, it is at their expense. If China enters my market and destroys whatever API I'm trying to revive, it is at my expense. I don't want China. I'll buy API from China, but I have to develop my own. If I buy more than a certain limit, they'll underprice it and my API will collapse. Same thing goes for electronics, same thing goes for many things. So you have to force China to come and invest here. It's not as if you don't deal with China. You tell China, chap, okay, you want to come invest. Put money on the floor. Make things here. I'll buy it. But it's only the company which is Chinese. Workers have to be Indian, 100%, except a certain amount of technological guys. Something like Microsoft, Google, and all that. And have a clear plan that after and how much percentage someone has to hold, not hold. There has to be a controlling interest in India so that they don't siphon money out from here. So these are things which are going to happen. Okay, there are things which will happen. Just to give you an idea, there's one firm called Winfest, which is coming with cars, EVs in India. It's ostensibly coming from Vietnam, but I'm sure you go into it, it'll be a Chinese company. Don't allow that. Right? So things like that are there. Okay, so I spoke of demography, I've spoken of markets, I've spoken of aided economy. The fourth thing, security. In the first quarter of this century or the first 2 decades of this century, China threat was not really the way people are seeing it today. For Taiwan, China was not a threat, incidentally, in the beginning of this century. They wanted cross-strait cultural exchanges, cross-strait businesses, tourism, everything. Japan, Korea were integrated into the Chinese economy. In fact, Korea and Japan have helped China grow, but they were not security threats, right? For that matter, China was not considered a security threat even by India. Go back to the time of 2008, 10, they were not security threat. There were some incidents, yeah, all that gone. But today it's your great security threat with Pakistan. So the security scenario for China itself has changed. Where they didn't have any troops along the Indian border, today they have troops along the Indian border. And that's a permanent commitment. They can't get out of it. And increasingly, they are realizing that India has now rebalanced. We are facing them toe to toe, nose to nose, head to head. They are fixed. That's a huge border to get fixed on. They got into a problem in Philippines. They had a problem with Japan now. So their security environment is deteriorating. This is the fourth point. From a positive security environment where they were feared all around and they were very clear about how to handle things, today they are in a negative security environment. In a negative security environment, you cannot grow. You can't grow because a lot of people will say, why should I deal with this fellow? And that's already happening. In this second half of this decade, you'll see this happening. Okay. And fifth point, I'm the fifth point I'm going to make is on resources. China is a country which till 2010 was self-sufficient in resources, except energy. Today it is not so. That self-sufficiency in resources has gone. It's not self-sufficient in water. That's why it wants to take water from Brahmaputra and Lake Baikal. They have a plan, long-term plan in Brahmaputra and the dam and all this water diversion. Because they don't have water. Fresh water in China is useless. Forget being potable, it can't be used for industry also. It's so polluted. And of course, the issue of uh, um, you know natural disasters. So both these things put together, that water as a resource, they are in the negative side. Oil, as they have grown, their requirement of oil has increased, and their sources have decreased. You see what's happening with Venezuela? I showed you. Okay, I showed that. Now, if Venezuela is closed, see the effect on China. I did mention when I spoke on Venezuela that US intent is to kick China out of Latin America, and they're doing it. It will happen. When that happens, what happens to China? What about food? Today, China is a food insecure nation. It's the biggest importer of food in the world. Okay? It's changed. What about minerals? You leave rare earths out. It needs minerals from outside. So if you look at it from being self-sufficient, they've gone over, in terms of resources, they're dependent on resources. These 5 points are very critical from being positive to net negative. That is why this year of the snail. And the only way they can get out of this is consumption and people. And they're not able to do it. Okay? They can't do it. If the Chinese people have to pull this country out of the problems, and the Chinese politics will not allow them to pull them out of the problems. I hope you understood what I've said. I'll take some questions now. But before that, if you like this video, press the like button and the thumbs up button. Also, do subscribe to Gunner Shot. Press that bell icon and join me as a member. I've done 3, 4 uh, videos on China with a purpose, because China is giving out this huge amount of there's a churn in China, let's put it, and the churn in China is being felt outside. That is why I'm talking on China today. I've spoken largely without slides and all that, only certain amount of factual things what others have said I've put. But we have to understand this. Understanding this is important for us. Not because we're going to fight with China. Because China, as it reverses and as India grows, there is going to be friction. How this friction will manifest, whether it will manifest on Himalayas, whether it will manifest on Pakistan, whether it will manifest in the Indian Ocean, whether it will manifest in outside countries, is something which we have to start thinking of. And we have to change our outlooks. Right? With this, I'll take on a few questions. Yeah, please continue the trial walk. I'll do that tomorrow evening. Right. Akash, good evening. And also Jai Hind from Bangalore, Sai Auto Vision from Bangalore. Akash, morning. Looking great and sharp as ever, sir. Thanks a lot. I'd like to thank Umar Raghavan for joining me back as a member. I think you were a member earlier, if I'm not mistaken. Great to have you back. Otherwise, also great. Then Ladybird Haru, good morning. Sir, Chinese media रशिया की ईस्टर्न साइड टेरिटरी को क्लेम कर रहा है. Yes, I've done a program on that. Trans Manchuria. I'll do it again. What are the areas? Everything. Some one of these days. Right. Please some Air Force history as well, sir. Yeah, I'll do that. We'll talk of it. We'll talk. I'll get Diptendu Chaudhary one of these days. Like I said, this week I have not called anyone because I wanted to revive myself and get into the swing of thinking, because last week I was off with the ramjet and all that. The test. I was sitting in Pokhran for 4 days. Okay. Dorong ko beach mein. And then I went to Devlali to meet all my friends. That's how it is. Yeah, that today everything has changed. People often forget that la- Rajasthan alone is larger than 80% of European countries and half the size of entire Middle East. So development will naturally, there's no doubt. So we are unable to promote local crackers against Chinese, which is a one-time buy in a year. How are we able to take advantage? No, don't be under any mistaken thing that we are not able to promote. What is happening in Sivakasi is something you have to go there and see. I've been to Sivakasi, incidentally. We are promoting, and this is an effort which I'm doing very consciously, that reduce cracker factories and convert the expertise of these cracker factories into space and defense, because the basic chemistry of propulsion and warheads and all is there. They have the capability, so we are trying to convert that. As a result, your cracker thing is going down. It's good. Incidentally, it's good. Can we have a war game regarding chicken neck in the east? There's no need. Yeah. Okay, let me tell you. And I keep telling this. In 99 to 2000, in 2000, I was doing the high command course, and in high command course we have a war game on PLA. I was made the PLA commander, and I was given 30 divisions and said invade India. Okay, invade India. That was my one thing. Invade India. and grab maximum territory over all that. Nothing large. I was like the chief of the PLA. So I made my plan with my team. And then by then I had 4 tenures in the east, so I knew the terrain well, everything. I tried my best. I couldn't capture the chicken snake. I couldn't. And things can't change. And mind you, all of us who did this plan later became GOCs of divisions, corps commanders, DGRT like me, and high appointments. We all retired now, old people. We knew our plan well, but we couldn't get hold of the chicken snake. We couldn't get hold of it. So don't worry. Okay. I hope I've answered this question of mine. Yours. But I'll one of these days I'll explain it to you. Aren't these common lines every politician speak? Yeah, that's it. That's how it is. The CPC or the Communist Party of China is a political animal. You have to understand. I keep telling everyone that if you understand the politics of China, the rest everything is falls in place. The politics of China today will not allow it to grow. Good morning, sir. Bangladesh is in total chaos. Yeah, let's see how it goes. Maybe tomorrow or maybe day after, I'll talk of Bangladesh. Yeah, 90% of crackers were made in India, only 10% were imported. I agree with you. It's not as if, see, the thing is, the shift is earlier it was 100%, today it's 90%. I hope it becomes zero and we have to import everything. Why should we make? And that capacity is something which you can divert to others. And there's a whole lot of export also going out from Sivakasi. You have to go to Sivakasi to understand that. I've been there. I have connected with them through IIT. Thank you for not importing, saving for forex. But before that, what were you doing? Okay. I think China is playing the whale Kingfisher Airlines strategy or outproduce others, absorb. Yeah, this is an old story. Yeah. There's nothing much about this. What you said. Looks like China is in a state of Keynesian economics on steroids, add mixed with a curve inversion. Yep, you're right. There's no doubt. Amitesh, hello, and Arsenal Trull, hello. Uh, I live in the US and I try my best avoiding buying anything made in China items. If made in China, invariably item is cheap quality. I buy and return if not satisfied, and this hurts them even more. I 100% agree with you. I have studiously avoided anything which is made in China. Unfortunately, a lot of our even like went and bought Bosch fridge in my house and a washing machine, but these are made in China. That's the problem. Okay, now things will change. I hope it changes. Got the power back by sipping coffee. Oh, that's my morning coffee. Like I told you, I go for a walk in the morning, do a little bit of research, talk, nature, and I'll come back, get ready, and then talk. Hmm. There is a high probability of Z attacking Taiwan to divert and consolidate their population, General Saab. Kailash, come back to me. Maybe one of these days I'll see what is the feasibility of China attacking Taiwan and what is the future of that whole story. You have to understand the cause effect. There's a cause, there's an effect, and what will that lead to? If you understand that, you'll know that Xi Jinping will never attack Taiwan. He'll never attack Taiwan. I'll talk of it tomorrow or maybe day after. It's there in the back of my head. In fact, General Rajiv Narayanan and I did a program on this, on Taiwan, whether he's capable of attacking or not. Yeah, Modi government allowed 100% FDI in insurance sector. Modi government surrendered. Look, I don't think it's so bad. I don't think FDI up to 100% has even come into India, right? And one number two is you need FDI. You need FDI to grow. If you don't have FDI and investment from abroad, you can't grow. That's the law today. You can't be self sufficient. You can't be an island of excellence. You need technology. You need many things. Okay. In any case, earlier we were being cheated by our own people. So you have competition if you get people from outside. Why is our theaterization taking so long? We'll talk of it separately. Hmm. I think China is inherently in unstable equilibrium and can only be governed with an iron fist. No, China is not inherently in a state of unstable equilibrium. China has this history of being so. China, if you go back into the history of China, every time there's a regime change, there has been strife. Regime change in China is based on strife. Empires have come and gone based on strife, and that strife invariably started in the olden days because of famines and floods. Today it's a little different, but it'll happen. Yeah, in 2014, India was in debt of 40 lakh crore, but now 200 lakh crore. Isn't it a debt trap for India? No, it's not. I showed you that graph. Today, your economy is also 5 to 6 times more than what it was in 2014. That's the thing. So if economy go, if you, it's a debt to GDP ratio which matters. You're not cross even 100%. Yeah, we'll talk of Bangladesh maybe tomorrow or day after. Yeah, I read CPC selling off local soya bean produce so that it can fulfill commitment made to US. Possible. It's possible. Whatever this thing. You know what China does, one doesn't know. PRC will buy more oil from Russia, I guess. No, they won't. They're scared because tomorrow, then, if Russia turns off the tap, they're finished. There are other issues. Just don't think that one thing opens and you go running to the other side. No. Right, Shruti Chandak, long time no see. Namaskar to you. Um, yeah, this is important. China will never recover because China's future is Japan's present. Japan's economy is stagnating since more than 2 decades. You're right. Japanification is a factor which is happening. Okay. Depopulation through inflation is the new frontier. I don't think so. I don't think that will happen. Depopulation is happening otherwise. I have friends in China. They will focus on high-end tech like semiconductors, power electronics, while outsourcing low-end to BRI countries. Chinese are already working. It will not work. It will not work. The numbers don't add. Numbers don't add. BRI people don't have the capability of doing all this. They will not outsource. They cannot outsource. No one is in. See, the trust factor is not there in China. That's the thing. And BRI countries can't. Okay, even if you produce them in BRI countries, where will you consume it? Chinese are working on a plan for the past 30 years. It's not working. It's yeah. India can't afford to remain a mediocre country anymore. We are not a mediocre country. I think you have missed out. You come with a lot of comments. I would suggest you have a look at the thing about India series which I put out. I put out 5 articles, 5 posts on India. See where India is going. Good morning and Jai Hind, General Shankar. Very good analysis. I have been following this series on China and it's very educative. Thank you. Picasso also, hi, morning. Uh, you should get some folk from Double Limb Dialogues. What is that? I don't even know. Yeah, love of life. Yeah, Ramdas Navile. China's export is 3.4 trillion in 2025. Where is China's economic declining? I think you have absolutely no clue about what is China, and you are looking one-sided like a blind horse. So I don't think I'll explain to you. Please see my previous things. Yeah, this morning article on in SCMP on China should win global hearts and minds to capture space left behind by us. Who will win? Who? Which global heart they'll win? Yeah, Prashant Dhawan sir and Subramaniam Swami said to me that China weakness, no China weaknesses of China. A person need to know Mandarin. Are you agree with it? I don't agree with it. I don't agree with it. You don't need, Mandarin is not psychology. Huh? Human psychology remains human psychology. Human politics remains human politics. They might have their own brand. Gone are the days when you needed to know Mandarin. Once upon a time you needed, not now. Yeah, today you gave 360-degree view with anecdotes of China's desire to dominate, as they say. They just don't want a piece of pie. They want the whole on expense of other country growth through policy of expansionism. That's it. And no one is prepared to give it to them. That's the point. Neil, good morning. Yeah. Yeah. Long ago, on a presentation on Gunnershot, you explained to us that China will never attack Taiwan because geographically, military impossible. Yeah, Jai Hind. I'll repeat it because a lot of people still have doubts. I'll repeat it. Um, so, kindly bring Major General Rajiv Narayan for analysis. He's a Bangladesh society economist. I'll do that because he spent a year in Bangladesh. I know it well. Yeah, what will India do if China invades Taiwan? Will say go, keep invading, and then you'll finish off. You have to understand that. Let me talk about that a little later, sometime. Whether Taiwan will be invaded by China. China will never invade Taiwan. That will be the end of China. Okay, I'm done for the day. We'll talk in the evening. I'm sure Sanjay Dixit will come up with something. Uh, because today is Friday, normally I do with Jaipur dialogues. Uh, if that is not there, I'll speak on Arunachal Pradesh, one of the two. Instead of tomorrow, I'll speak today. Okay, with this, thanks a lot. Thanks for joining. Have a great day and Jai Hind to all of you.